recording. So once again, thank you for coming, Lisa Johnson. This is our third masterclass here on Ethnographic Message by Dr. Lisa Johnson. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. So what I want to do with you today is really to have a discourse, because what I can offer you, I mean, I gave you some texts to read for your preliminary preparation. And I think those texts, they were already kind of embarking on this journey that I want to do with you today, because I will give you some slides, of course, today about what ethnographic research methods are. And I will especially also talk about visual ethnography, because I think this is really important for a lot of people here in this room. But I also want to just offer you to ask me questions for your own projects, because I think this is more, you know, what I'm here for, to give my expertise about problems, questions, concerns that you have really. And if today is not enough, I will also be willing to, you know, be there, and you can maybe make a virtual office hour with me, because fieldwork is a thing that you cannot plan and control so much. In the process of fieldwork, you will always come at points where you think, what should I do now? What can I do with this? So therefore, it's always good to have someone to talk to. I mean, you have your advisors, but if there's an ethnographic problem, I will also be willing to help here. So I want to share my screen first. Let's see if that works. Can you see this?
Yep, all good.
Perfect. So what I did was, no, I still see you guys. Okay, good. So what I did was for today is I want to also upload this workbook. So that's how I called it, of ethnographic fieldwork methods to your OLAT platform, I think it is. So you can have this and review it anytime you need it again. So first of all, what we're going to do today in this course is we learn about conducting ethnographical research. We will define fieldwork and what visual ethnography is. I would like to talk to you about the emic and the ethic viewpoints, and about researcher reflexivity, which is really important in current anthropological research and what was also discussed in your text. And I want you to get an idea of ethnographic approaches to border, films, and media. And for our opening, I have here one of these pictures that we had in our press recently of the border closed between Saarland and France during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I will have images throughout my entire presentation of different sources. And I also want you to pay attention to those images, because the visual has a very strong point in representing things. So we will talk about that and what it means to present such an image, such as this border image here. So ethnographic fieldwork, we start with a bit in general. Ethnographic fieldwork is, and I have to switch her around here, is the primary way that cultural anthropologists gather data. So it's really our qualitative approach that we use to understand the world. So fieldwork is really a process of traveling somewhere, immersing oneself in as many aspects of people's lives as possible in order to study their behavior, their interactions, their ways of really viewing the world. So nearly any setting or location can become the field. As you saw in your text that you read for today, it was a coffee shop. And it can also be a village along the River Nile, as you can see in these pictures, a large corporate office in Tokyo, a small neighborhood cafe in Seattle, like in the text, or a social networking site like Facebook even. Or again, a site at the US-Mexico border, for example. I will show you an example of that. So ethnography, what it does is really, it explores the subjective world. It aims to provide an in-depth understanding of people's experiences, of their perspectives, their histories, and also the meanings they ascribe to those histories, and also in the context of their own personal circumstances or local, spatial, social, cultural settings. So the key theoretical aims when we do an ethnographic research project are, first of all, we need to clarify the relational dynamics that hold existing ways of thinking and acting in place in relation to specific situations that interest us. And then we can inquire into these spaces in which people make up their minds about things, insisting that making up your mind is, of course, always a relational process and not the autonomous choice of one individual. And then it is that we show that things might be also otherwise than we had been previously assumed. So we're not trying to test hypotheses as it's in sociology and then confirm whether they are correct or not. We really trying to bring new questions to the table and question previous assumptions about culture, places, and people. So ethnography as a word can also mean two things. One is research methods that we will talk about today, and the other is also the visual, written, descriptive, and finally the product of your work. So it can mean these two scopes. We will talk also about both of these scopes today, just to clarify the term ethnography as such. And then field work, and that's also something that the text really discussed very well, dates back centuries. So it is, I won't run you through anthropological history here because that doesn't help you for your research project. But it is generally a practice that takes a lot of time and preparation, also in terms of linguistic preparation about the places. But for really shorter research projects, a good planning is key. So including finding a research question, organizing your field trip. So that means where am I going? How am I going there? With whom am I talking there? What kind of help do I need to get there? And your methods, of course, and always asking yourself, why do you actually want to research this certain aspect of culture? So what is your aim of going there? What is your aim of questioning this specific research, and what are maybe your previous assumption of going there? So I chose this picture here because this is really sums up the history of anthropology in a nutshell. Anthropologists went out into the foreign, and I put that here in brackets, world, and assumed to find something totally different from their own. But really and truly, when the anthropologists came, the people packed away their TV stations and their microwaves, right? And then again, when we talk about visual ethnography, which is a specific part of ethnographic research methodology, it brings really together the theory of ethnography and also practices of visual approaches, like audiovisual recording, for example. So therefore, it's an approach that you can learn and know more about the life worlds of people, of communicating these to others also. And however, in this visual ethnography, so you're not just writing a text, but you have a visual product at the end, there is a great deal of representational power here. In a text, of course, there's a great deal of representational power, but you have the possibility in the text to always contextualize. When you show one image, there's a high subjectivity of the visual that we definitely need to address when we do visual ethnography in our project. Because as recently Forrester Research found out for social media research, 1 minute of video is actually worth 1.8 million words. So when we say a picture speaks more than 1,000 words, that's exactly what I want to point here at, to be aware of that actually, situation with the visual. So doing ethnography. So the hallmark of ethnographic research in anthropology is known to be participant observation. What means that? That actually means that when you go into the field, you're trying to get contact to people. Here, for example, this is a fruit seller lady at a fruit stand in Jamaica that I went to every day to buy my fruits at, and she eventually became one of my informants for my research. So it is really going about your daily business and trying to get yourself into the life worlds of other people, getting to know them, talking to them, and then starting to observe, but at the same time be part of their life. So there's always a play that you have to realize that happens between distancing yourself from the subject that you, or from the situation where you're in and the research that you're in, but at the same time being very in a social proximity to people and be very close to people and eventually even, you know, become befriended with people and so forth. So when an anthropologist records their experiences and observations while taking part in activities alongside local participants, that actually means you engage in informal conversations, either at the marketplace or at the kitchen table. But you can also, of course, do formal qualitative interviews. You can run surveys, even quantitative surveys are now common in anthropology. You can let people fill out questionnaires, or you can create, like I did here, photos. You can make sound or video recordings. And you always have to conduct, of course, also historical and archival research into corresponding with, you know, your films, your reports, and your records and your research interests, because the historical background and the social cultural context is always very important in framing your results, in framing your visual material that you created, your data that you produced. So key informants again, ethnography is really a collaborative and participative effort between the ethnographer and their research participants. So it's not like in regular qualitative research where you go and you make interviews and then you leave. No, it's way more participative than that. So therefore, anthropologists have ethical codes that guide their behavior in the field, because it's really, I would say, the most humanist of all sciences. And we heavily rely, and are also in a way vulnerable in the situations that we're in. So we heavily rely on functioning relationship with others in order to conduct really our research. So in the ethnographic process, informants or key participants like Uncle B that you can see here in this picture, who was one of my key informants in Jamaica, can really help you to induct you into society and explain its customs and ways in a certain way that you would not know without being in touch with someone personally. So that means when we go into the field and we take data from people, we have to act ethically reflexive, and we have to be empathic also for their life world and have a certain respect. As you can see, this post that Uncle B is doing, it means respect in Jamaica. So you always have to respect also when you conduct visuals of people, because it's very, very private, of course, right? Okay, so then writing ethnography, I put this here because ethnographic writing differs, of course, from historical or journalistic or travel writing, because what I presented to you now could sound like this is all like, sounds like a travel diary or something. No, it's not. So even though ethnographers keep a fieldwork diary, which I would also highly recommend for some of you guys who go into the field, that can contain personal notes and thoughts, ethnography is much more than just recounting basic daily events in people's lives. So it engages with theoretical foundations and is written with cultural contextualizations in mind, speaking to anthropology as a discipline, as well as furnishing in-depth understandings of the cultural world that has been explored. So the ultimate aim of ethnographic undertaking is really to produce that contributes to and advances the current comparative interpretation of human cultures and societies. And here, ethnography developed very much as a discipline itself. So I have here a little chart where you can see the anthropologic dialogue with the other that changed over the years. So pre-modern anthropology, mostly in colonial times, that's where it comes from. You saw that also in the text. really dealt with, I'm sorry, gentlemen, I do not speak your language, right? That's what he says first when the man in the picture says, so this is a ritual about fertility. Then modern anthropology, which was like in the 1980s, around 1970s, that time, he would say, let me draw my diagram. Excuse me, let me draw my diagram about this ritual. And where we are at now in postmodern anthropological thought, the man would say, so this ritual is about fertility, and the anthropologist would say, no, it's not. Do you understand why he's saying that? Do you have an idea? Yeah, I saw Lucas, maybe he said, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think I get this.
So
this
what
joke.
would be your idea about this? Why postmodern anthropologists would say, no, this is not a ritual about fertility, no?
Maybe because there, like, we think that there has been done already so much research before, like for example, the two men before talked to this person, and like they have done their own research, and we think we know already a lot, so we have to, you know, get into this. There are multiple points of view on this. What you tell me that might not be you know, what everyone agrees on. So there's maybe this, I don't know, maybe that's the reason, I would guess.
Well, it's mostly about this image here is mostly about questioning the category of the other. Because back centuries ago in the colonial past, or even in the 1970s, there was still the assumption that we have cultural others, speaking of which that culture is some sort of an island and it's excluded, holds basically, and it can clash with other cultures. And, you know, that culture is more island-like. Nowadays, in the postmodern world, we know culture is not like an island. Culture is not mutually exclusive. So culture is, in the sense of transculturality, influencing each other. So staging culture in a certain way, in a certain authenticity way, to basically become othered in that sense, as it is here in this folk tale, so to speak, in this folkloristic tale, is also a way that anthropologists portrayed foreign culture in the back of the day. So they always wanted to portray the foreigners. So they didn't look at similarities so much between cultures, but they looked more at the differences. And nowadays, anthropologists are more aware that certain differences are not there anymore. So that's why, you know, he's speaking to him like that. Oh no, I know it's not, but I know you used to tell that to my colleagues from back in the days, but I know, no, that's not the case. Astrid.
Yeah, I also wanted to say, because we had a station learning, and we also remember when we talked about culture, when Klaus Heisenberger talked about culture, he also talked about culture now not being seen as a container anymore, right? I think this is also what you mean when you say island, or a container that kind of has certain things, so that kind of the ritual is about fertility or so on, but that we engage in cultures, right? And we do culture.
Right.
So in that sense, you know, I read the answer, no, it is not, right? It's not, because it's not a kind of thing that, you know, that can be really, right?
Yeah, right.
Or that a culture can have, but it's something that.
So it's something to be done, and not something that you can basically frame or grab, such as armchair anthropology did when they were sitting down and they were writing their diagrams and they were writing down exactly how it was done. And that's the only way, and there's no other. Basically, culture is processual. That's what it also shows, right? That we're in a process, not only as academia in a thought process, but that culture constantly develops, and it's something to be done and not something statical or something that is fixed. Yeah. Okay, good. So then I want to talk to you about an insider's view. So the text talked about the insider's view of ethnography, and I want to talk a little bit more what that means. So anthropologists, when they do ethnography, they try to arrive at an emic perspective. So the insider's point of view, that's what emic means. In other words, they try to understand the structures, the categories, the patterns of behavior as conceptualized by members of the culture that they are studying. So this is contrasted with ethic models, which are analyses of cultures as seen from the outside, such as how an anthropologists would classify behavior from the outside. So, however, both perspectives are mutually important because what people say they do, what they say they should do, and what they actually do rarely, if ever, coincide. And without asking an outsider could then miss valuable information about why people do what they do. And this is specifically important when you're taking photographs or when you're taking audiovisual material of people, because then especially you need to be aware, so to speak, of both sides or all sides of the coin. Here I have an example for you that is a corpus mining the body from Daniel Hoffman from 2010. It's an anthropological ethnographic photo collage that he took at the borderland of Sierra Leone and Liberia. And here he was photographing in a long photo collage. When you click here on that link, you will find the entire photo collage and also how he framed the photo collage together with his text, which I think is really interesting also for your project, so that he had the photos and then he always explained also the different visuals and why he used them in that context. And here Hoffman tries to evoke with his visualization of the militant and the masculine mining bodies that how to understand how destructive the realities and how harsh they are in these diamond mines in this war zone, in this borderland between Sierra Leone and Liberia. So this is a very interesting project that deals with the border in an embodied way, so to speak. And I found it a very good exercise if you guys have time to look at that in your research to understand how insider and outsider view are playing with the visual. This is also another image. So here you can see what Hoffman tries to evoke. So here he's standing with a shovel, like in front of this pit that he finally finished to dig. So a very militant kind of Victorian pose that he's making with this image. And you have the view down into the mining pit, and you see how much work he did already and how much physical work it also was. And you can kind of see how this work and the war zone and the diamond and the whole capitalist machinery that is behind it kind of is imprinted, so to speak, in this man's body here, because we don't even see his face. So I think this is a very interesting photo collage of an ethnographic visual project. So, and anthropologists, and I said that already in an earlier slide, we are today increasingly aware of our own views and biases that we carry with us into the field from our home cultures, acknowledging or trying to acknowledge wherever possible how this affects our own findings and methods. So despite all of the best intentions, any practicing field worker can tell you that field work is at best unpredictable. So a reflexive approach to ethnographic research acknowledges that no researcher can ever be 100% objective. That is not possible. And that fieldwork constitutes really an ongoing dialogue of consent and mutual respect between the participants and ethnographers. So here I have this image, the reality TV channel that, should kind of, give you an idea of this reflexive approach that no one ever 100% can be rational or realistic in portraying anything really or portraying others. So I want to talk now a little bit about border ethnography that I find also interesting, especially in pictures. So what anthropologists really brought to the study of borders is a sensitivity to the role of borders in daily life and also to people's narratives of the meanings and the ways in which borders were marked in and through their everyday practice. So it is in this emphasis on how borders are really constructed, negotiated, and viewed from below where the strong point of ethnography lies. And here ethnographic, especially multimedia methods, became crucial in the understanding of cultural processes and products of borders and also of bordering. And here you see in the image below is an example, the field recording of at the border, making the border heard. That's this project. And what this project Border Sounds did from 2001 was they actually attached audio, how you call it now, recorders, thank you, recorders at the fences of the border. And they were recording what sounds was there, what sounds did they, how the border basically sounds like, and also interactions at the border. So at different posts along the border, they set up audio recording, including, I think they took pictures, but that was not the main aim of the ethnography. The main aim of the ethnography was really to conduct audio material. And then later on, they created, of course, a written text out of it, but also a podcast. So where they showed the sounds of the border and then contextualized them at different posts along the US-Mexico border. So the focus of border or the bordering processes and practice and ethnographic media lies nowadays really on the visual portraying of human placemaking practices and placement, and also the multisensorality of the human experience. So it's not just about the visual anymore. It's also about what we can hear, what we can smell, what we can feel, what our bodies do. So it's not only about the visual representation anymore. And also in using the end or the boundary and the border, however you want to see it, as a site of experience and encounter of people in a more mediated way. So working visuals ethnographically means, on the one hand, of course, to portray the narratives that you collected, the interviews and visuals of human experiences and practices, but also on the other hand, to interpret and highlight these through a mediated form. This can be cinematic, film, photo collage, podcast, and other compositions. You can influence how something is portrayed through camera height, the movement of the camera, the distance to certain objects, persons, the point of view. So if your angle is from above, if your angle is from below, if your angle is from the side, and of course, sound, lighting, and editing, which will come in your later processes in your project. So here I find is really interesting this volleyball, which was introduced in 1979 to the US-Mexico border. And since then, it's been played in various cities along the border. So the purpose is behind this game was to help solidify, in a way, that's what the initiator said, a positive intercultural transnational relationship between both the US and Mexico, where really the ball game bridges the gap between neighboring communities. And this is held as a cultural festival, as a binational cultural festival every year. And people who are actually harshly separated by this really dangerous and also threatening border are engaging in playing games over the border. So this I found is a very nice volleyball actually. So this I think is a very nice production of Brent Hoff. I inserted here the link where you can also watch a short trailer about this movie, how he kind of portrayed this crossing the border with the volleyball between in this borderland between the US and Mexico. So ethnographic films quite literally make visible and more accessible the work of anthropology, from the process of field work to the analysis of cultural values, beliefs, and behaviors. And moreover, with its combination of sound, moving image, the film medium can really be regarded as more akin to the lived experience, more immediately also apprehensible as a written ethnographic text, and also more capable of communicating insights to a broader public. So what ethnographic film can really do is, most of the time ethnographic texts are mainly for academia. Ethnographic film can actually have broader audiences, and that's what really makes it also part of an action anthropology. A lot of film ethnographers are activists or trying to raise certain questions about issues in the world that are relevant to discuss, such as Borderland. And therefore, it kind of has a broader reach. So I here want to show you now the official trailer of Border South. I don't know if you heard about that movie. It's made by, it's basically an anthropologist who took the camera with him. And I just wanted to watch that trailer with you so that we just have here an idea of how such, of course, a bigger project of a border film could look like. I'm wondering if I included the sound when I shared the screen. We have to check that right now. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I have to unmute Mom.
Can you hear this?
No.
No, okay. So I need to share it again.
And I also have to unmute my microphone so that you can hear the sound. I learned that.
Okay. Let me try it again. No, this is not right.
I thought so, yeah. Yes.
No, this is not the right one.
Okay.
This is half fiction. So now we're not at half fiction. We're at ethnographic cinema, observational ethnographic cinema right now. Okay. So here.
Uno sale con Dios.
Perfect.
Dios lo que cuida es el alma de uno, pero lo físico, lo que le vaya a pasar, Dios no nos protege allí.
Each year, hundreds of thousands of migrants begin a dangerous journey across Mexico to the U.S.
¿Estás listo? Para correr como venado.
Si vas a las vías por ahí donde andes, man, ya no vas a estar tranquilo. Porque sabes que usted llegan los mañosos, llega la migra, los ladrones.
Me toco y me miro con sangre.
An anthropologist traces their remains in the desert.
In 20 years, this stuff will all be gone, totally erased.
Y todos esos puntos rojos son de cadáveres, son gente que se murió en el camino.
Thousands disappear along the way. Others hope and continue on.
Y dije yo no puedo quedarme aquí.
Border South on Doc World.
Yeah, so why I use this trailer is to kind of show you the difference between, so you could ask now, where's the difference between a documentary and an ethnographic film, right? Because that's the question always that I heard in other classes. So what is the difference here is that this anthropological film was produced through anthropological fieldwork, of course. So it's not just that people go and film and portray. So it was a long project over 2-3 years of fieldwork at the border site. And you see also he did not only take film footage. So he took pictures, he did interviews with people at the site. He had local key informants, people who went with him and he could interview. He actually also accompanied migrants who were trying to trespass the border, also sometimes not in legal terms. And he was also part of a larger project where they portrayed this map of how much, and that is also an extended project of the No More Deaths project. I don't know if you discussed that here already in this group, where anthropologists and ethnographers on site are trying to record how much people died already in the process of trying to trespass basically the border between the US and Mexico, and then developed it into a bigger arts project where you have the tags, the dead tags, is it how the correct name that you normally get over your toe in the US American pathology, is it how it's called, right? And then they pin it on a big board and they show you thousands. We saw that exhibition at a conference in Frankfurt Oder. They show you thousands of these tags then along the US-Mexican border. So it's not just a documentary alone, because in the trailer you cannot see as much, but the film really tries to go more deeper into the into this understanding of how migrants or trespassers' life worlds are influenced by this border, and how it really stops them from families, from a better life in that sense, and how dangerous this is, and also how and what kind of vulnerable situation they're in this situation. So it's a really interesting movie, and I mean, if you have the time in your research and you're looking to do a similar film clip like this, I would really recommend to watch the entire movie and to see what they did there. So it's a mix of interviewing, of letting the people narrate their story, and not so much of taking influence on the ethnographic material. It's contextualized, of course, by the ethnographer, but it's more letting the people have a discourse here about their situation with the border and at the border. So this is maybe the difference from a regular documentary, and also from fiction, which is something I also would like to address, because there's of course also ethnographic visual representations that are half fictional and half ethnographic. So I also would like to talk about this. So producing ethno-fictional films, which is a little bit different, and it might make more sense if you do so when you do not have a lot of time on your hands, because as we discussed earlier, fieldwork normally takes generally a lot of time. You also saw that in the text. But if you do not have 2 years, to do a research project ethnographically, then it is maybe, or not maybe, it makes a lot of sense to pre-plan, as I said earlier, certain scenes. Maybe also coupled with voiceover narrations that you will add in post-production, that are also really common in ethnographic produced films. And the resulting films are then both fictional, in that they are not direct recordings or real events, as in the Border South, or experiences, but ethnographic in that sense that they really explore and reflect on the actual social cultural lives and belief systems and values and situations of people and at certain sites. So it is, let's say, a mix out of a pre-planned, well-focused design that you structure in a mediated form, and also in an ideal way. That doesn't mean it's rigorous. That doesn't mean you cannot change it, or it's not up for changes in the process, but you're trying to guideline yourself through a specific question with a specific set of pre-planned scenes, and then coupled then with, so to speak, the social cultural context, and maybe also the historical context of the site under research. And here I want to show you an half fiction, half ethnographic film, which was done in Jamaica. It's a trailer also, it's only 1 minute. And I will show it to you first and then say something about it.
Some a build big houses, and some a deal with corrosions.
You're right, Sean, someone on me, man. You know the number for the artist. I get a link, you know, and a dub plate link, you know. Yeah, man, Nightmare. I get a dub plate link, you know. Can't make a little fool in the car. They are blocked, isn't it?
Life will live and no better than the roses. Life will live and no better than the roses.
My day I still not try to sort out a little thing, you know what I'm saying?
So as the end showed, it said a tale about Jamaican music, right? So that already gives you a hint at the fictional character of it, because this is actually the main actor here in this short movie, which is 28 minutes long. And that's also something you can find on YouTube. I have the link here posted in the workbook for you. Is one of your service members for your project. So here you saw Clayton Johnson as the actor in one of these half fictional, half ethnographic movies. He also was included in the post-production of this movie. And what this movie does, it tells you a story about really the classical tale of the ghetto. So here you find a story of inner city Jamaican young musicians who try to make a way out of their marginalized circumstances by making music and gaining success from making music. And here you know that the scenes are pre-planned. The actors are actors. They are not informants. And they are kind of giving you, you have, so to speak, Clayton Johnson here is the hero in that tale. He is making his way up with music. But at the same time, the entire film is highly ethnographic because it actually stems on real events and on real life situations of Jamaican musicians in Kingston, Jamaica. And it also, throughout the short film, you get an idea of the actual situation there and how it really is. Of course, that in the end of the movie, and I spoiler here, the hero will make a big song and become famous. That is not for all musicians there so, because there is as much musicians in Jamaica as bakers are in Germany. But at the same time, it is highly ethnographic because it gives you an understanding of life in Jamaica, of the situation there, of the current socioeconomic situation, the political situation. And of course, it's not about a border as a hard thing that you can see, but it's really about overcoming the border of being poor and overcoming certain things in your life. So it also, in a way, tells a story about overcoming social borders that a lot of young people face in impoverished areas in the suburbs and in the urban areas of Kingston, Jamaica. So I just wanted to give you these two different ideas of how ethnographic film can look like. And to finish off my presentation, this is my last slide before we discuss. I just wanted to take these two examples to say again that doing ethnography with or without visual media means that you're storytelling via different genres. And at the time of the process, when you're finished collecting your data and you're finished organizing, then comes the time of writing or producing or putting together the photo collages, the podcasts, the films, whatever you want to do. And that is also the time of representation. And representations often becomes controlled by the author, whose voice then is privileged. And they pass over into the property, in a way, of our Western world, of our kind of narratives that we see, and become also part of our truth regimes and our way of ordering the knowledge and the ideas that we gathered. So when you start your ethnographic projects, I just want to ask you, who is the author? And that is something, how it was done here. You see these sources that I just read out are from a little bit back in the days. It's just really important to understand, are we authoring what we collected, the data, the visuals, the people, the interviews, or are we maybe more in a way of contextualizing what we gathered? So nowadays, we better understand the ethnographic context as one of cooperative story making, which in one of its ideal forms would result in a polyphonic text or a polyphonic product, none of whose participants would have the final word in the form of a framing story or encompassing synthesis, a discourse on the discourse, so to speak. And that is something I would really love, for you to do, that you kind of always keep that reflexive mode in mind, keep the emic and the ethic perspective in mind, keep in mind own biases and values, kind of also learn to unknow certain things that is specifically important when you research in your own culture. because it's easier to unknow things and to learn new when you're not in your own environment, in your own social setting. So especially when you research close to your own social cultural setting, it is very important to always question yourself, why do I want to know this? What is my aim behind this? Where am I coming from? In the whole process, and that not only finishes with setting up your research questions and your scenes, but it continues along the lines until you finish your project. So this is really an important point I want to make, that ethnography is really a cooperative and participative process, and it should always involve all the voices that your data shows throughout. Yeah, so I think that's my take on it. I have some references here, a little slide on culture, and I would like to upload this. Tobias, I will give you that and you can upload it. And now I would like you to ask questions. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Lisa, I think you managed to bring together a lot of things that have already been talked about, that have already, been brought up. And I think you now managed to bring that together. And I think it's great that we have now about an hour for discussion.
Yeah,
because
so
I'm sure you all have questions.
Yeah, I thought that everyone also could talk about maybe project ideas and already about access to these ideas, how you go there, how you want to go about. And yeah, I was unsure what you did before, so that was kind of into the blue for me, but yeah.
May I say one thing before we open up the floor for students to, questions? I already said that yesterday, and we have already talked. You all know, that the teachers here too, this is an adventure, right? I mean, we contracted people, so to speak, who co-teach this class. Some of the people, are people we know, others are people we don't know. So this is the phase, where we just offer input, and then we need, of course, the phase where we come together and also reflect upon this. And so thanks, Lisa, for helping us already do that. I said yesterday that I now am happy, that I suggested the idea of a glossary, right? And I said that, one of the tasks that you will have to do on OLAT is also to compile a glossary. And we will also make available to you via a couple of links, glossaries that already exist, so that you can look up some entries, brief definitions of concepts. I have already a lot of new simply words, basically you can take this as vocabulary, right? That I didn't know. I did not know what a log line was until yesterday. And that was, that was the new word that I learned yesterday. And so I don't know, I'm picking out a couple of words, concepts today that I just want to make sure that all of you are familiar with. So one, I just unroll the field now from, the last slide, so to speak. But this is a term that recently has become very important for me. And I'm pretty sure that this is something where we could start the discussion, and that is the word to unknow or to unlearn. And so my question, here, would be, to the students, if you know what the word to unknow is, because in a lot of, ways, I think this class is about unknowing. And this is usually, by the way, unsettling, right? It gets uncomfortable, right? Because we also want to bring you out of the comfort zone when we tell, okay, as a professor, I shouldn't say this, right? I shouldn't say, students, we're gonna unknow, anyway, but does anyone know what that means? Does anyone know what to unknow, what that could possibly mean? And then, of course, I hand back over to you because you brought it up. But just the whole, terminology, unknow, unlearn, and decolonize, by the way, not that easy, So anyway, I would just like to throw this out into the group here. If some of our Nikolaev students have come across that term. Some students who were in classes with me before have probably heard me speak about that because or in my research, but I'm not sure because it's a fairly new concept. Can I suggest something? My students love doing that. And Lisa, I think your students too, right? We have a chat function. So you can also just type things into the chat, if you don't want to speak, or we can do this at the same time, just ideas, we can do that, right? And Lisa, you have to get ready to give us a good definition here, right? Again.
Yeah, does anyone know what I meant by saying this? I mean, in theory, this is a new concept. However, in ethnography, this is since the 1970s already part of reflexivity. Of course, the concept has recently been used again more in theoretical considerations also. But practically, I talk about this very practically. What does that practically mean? So is there someone coming? No. Eintreten lassen.
Yeah, that's my question also, because I know what it means theoretically, but on the practical level.
So this is not a theoretical question. So just what do you think? What does that mean? No one? Okay, what does it mean to know? When I know.
I can just give a guess, but I have no clue. So my guess is that you have to, you should be open-minded and don't be influenced by, I don't know, what you have learned before, when you go on ethnographic field work to, I don't know, be as open to what you see and live there as possible. That's just my guess. Don't take into account everything what you have heard before, maybe.
Yeah, goes in the direction.
Maybe also that the people you talk to, that they are the experts, and that you're kind of in an unknown territory, and that you have to listen to them, that you are not the expert, but that you in the end contextualize and bring it all together.
Yes, very good. Another idea? Well, I guess you brought up already important points of the process of unknowing, or to learn how to unknow. It is, in the first place, it is that you do not think that your worldview is the only one that counts, or is right, or is truthful. So this is number one. So you have to be, in a way, very relativistic, in the sense that you accept also other people's worldviews, even though they do not coincide or are completely like the ones that you hold. And also that you be quiet. That is really also a part of unknowing, is not to try to influence what is happening to you too much. So when you are conducting field work, in the first preliminary phase, you really want to just take in. And in anthropology, we also speak of the process of serendipity. So just let it happen to you and accept and be present in the moment. It sounds a little bit like a yoga, situation, but that is really it. And anthropology is a confrontation with who you are as a person. So it will confront you with your own preliminary worldviews. It will confront you with your own judgments, and you will have to learn to confront yourself with yourself. So it's not about only learning about others, it's much more also learning about yourself and how you deal with situations, and how that also impacts the way you see the world. And then again, learning to unknow is also that you consider what people think they are knowing. So it's even on a meta level, you have to also consider all the tales, the histories, and the stories and the ideas that people are influenced by when they encounter with you. So it's not just accepting them only as who they are, but it's also then go beyond that and question on a meta level, what do they think they know, or what do they know, and how is that relevant for my study of the situation, of the social cultural context. So it goes even then in an academical sense beyond that. And then we come to this part of decolonization and certain levels of historicities that we always have to take into account when we talk about different people in different places in the world, and that they will also speak out of that experience, out of that historical experience, out of that, or maybe not, or so then that is the quest, so to speak, to always second guess.
A keyword which comes up to my mind now is ecology, to know the ecology where they have lived in and grown up, and this, like the environment, let's say, to have to put this into account and to know that they say this because they have lived this, maybe. Or is that wrong?
I mean, of course, there's also approaches that deal more with the human nature nexus. Of course, there is definitely people who more deal with that in that kind of sense, this ecological sense, but it's more than the ecology that surrounds people. It's much more than that. It's media, it's representation schemes that they have in their minds. So what they view, what they see, what they think of the world, it is not necessarily only what is in their direct surrounding, but also what influences them in a globalized world. By consuming media, by talking to other people from other places, by learning about the world. So it's more than just your direct environment. It goes beyond that. It's above the physical, I would say.
Well, for me, I'm not an anthropologist. I'm a cultural studies person, I'm a literature person, but trained in the North American context. So for me, or for us in North American studies, these terms have become really important, primarily in the field of indigenous studies. So in North America, we speak about decolonization and decolonial practices, and usually in the context of indigenous peoples, Native Americans, so to speak, right? And unknowing and unlearning. We also have the term unbordering now, desbordes in Spanish. So where we also, because the border, so to speak, or a border, of course, is a cultural product. The whole idea of ordering space in a certain way, right? Which has a very long history, of course, and is a very imperial and colonial endeavor, right? Mm-hmm. And to kind of unknow the border, so to speak. There is huge research on border unknowing. Does not only mean, that we do away with the border, but we do away with the ordering principle, right? That mm-hmm. comes along with the drawing of borders in the first place. Yeah. Personally, I would think, that it's super important and super interesting to apply, these kind of, not only, concepts, terms, but also, methods, when we look at the Black Sea borderlands, so to speak, that whole area, and of course also area as well. It's very difficult sometimes, I found, to speak of the greater region in terms of a colonial framework and so on. But as I listened to some of the presentations, that we have had here on Ukraine, And by the way, you have to help me, but the name Ukraine means border, right?
It's more like near the border.
Or near the border, yeah.
Mm.
So I think that this whole idea, you know, of decolonizing, of trying to think also outside of, I think it would be really helpful. So Lisa, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, that's great. And also what you just said, you know, Lisa, yesterday, remember when Yaroslav, or the 2 days ago, when they talked about confronting yourself, and they all said, right, this will be the most difficult part. You will get to know yourself, right, in your research process. Maybe you can say a little bit more about that, of how you go about that, because I think this is difficult, right?
Yeah, of course you need supervision, which is given because you're in a safe space here. So that is good. I just, from my own experience of doing ethnographic fieldwork, yeah, you will go through it. You know, you have to stay optimistic and have a positive mindset. I think that's good for everything that you do in life. But more so, you will be confronted with processes of waiting. Sometimes that was something that I really need to learn, to be, you know, waiting on people, waiting on situations to happen. And when you start your field work, a lot of times you're super motivated and you think, yeah, no, it's going to happen. And now I'm going to start and have all these great ideas. And then, yeah, you might face unforeseen roadblocks. People do not want to talk to you. People do not want to be photographed. People, I don't know, just don't have time for this right now, but you need to do it. And then you have to find your ways. Okay, how reconstruct? How could I do it differently? Why did my approach, why it didn't work? And you try to talk to someone else. So it's really like a snowball sampling. So you're throwing one snowball and you eventually hope there's a big snowman growing out of it, because you gather and gather and gather more material and people and places over time. This is definitely for a long field research days, a big topic. And yeah, and you just have to surrender and give yourself into certain situations and not try to be too controlling over certain issues. And especially when you research like me, I mean, of course that's a stereotype, but I researched in the Caribbean. So time as a concept in Germany or Europe is in the Caribbean a total different concept. So you will, especially when you go into other places than the ones that you know, there will be such small culture clash that you face, because all of a sudden you have to wait 4 hours maybe on a process that normally takes 5 minutes in Germany, or you're waiting at the bus stop and no bus is coming, and you wonder why you're the only one who doesn't know when the bus is really riding. So these are all these situations that can happen to you in fieldwork, and there you just have to, yeah, you just have to give yourself into the situation. That's also how you learn then to unknow what you think is normal. And that is really the quest of ethnographic fieldwork. So I guess, yeah, everyone who's an ethnographer has to have that kind of willingness to put themselves into uneasy situations also at times, and to, yeah, have an adventurous spirit, so to speak. There's a chat question. Please also post your questions here. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's, I would say, you have to keep your spirit up for the project that you do. So for your project, you should choose something that really that you burn for, that really ignites you, that is really something close to your heart. I think that is a good tip when you do small projects, student projects. It should be something that you really would like to know more about. So you have to have that will to inquire. That is really also really important. Yeah, so maybe you tell me a little bit about the projects and maybe your questions towards your own projects. Like, what would be your questions for your personal projects in terms of ethnographic work?
I think most of us only have very vague ideas because we don't know already in which teams we are going to be, like how, you know, if we're doing teamwork together with Ukraine, like everyone in mixed teams or some in mixed and others not. So I think it's very hard. Obviously, I have questions in my head and I have ideas, but I think it's the most important part is yet to come, to like brainstorm in the team, like where we want to go, what do we want to do. So I think for like, at least for me, it's a little, you know, a little early. But nevertheless, your presentation was super interesting, and I think it helped a lot, you know, to think of this while we brainstorm, you know. Yeah.
So is it that you have to build tandems? Is it like two, or how does it work, Astrid?
Lucas, what would you like to be in? And what type of team would you like to be in? This is about unknowing here. My answer is I do not know.
So no one knows up till now, but like I would love to be in a team, in a tandem, or like in a team together with one of person of Ukraine, because what I think of would be an interesting thing to do is to have one question, one like main question, and ask it, you know, from both sides. To how do, for example, what I have in my head is
that's the idea.
Yeah, so what I have in my head right now, what I'm interested in about Ukraine is, do, for example, people there fear that the border crosses them, you know, because the border has come closer to them where they are now due to the conflict. So what I'm wondering is, how do people react to this border approaching them, you know? And I'm still trying to figure out how could we translate this question to an area where, you know, we are here. It's maybe not such an issue, even if it has crossed people in the past, you know. Maybe we could find people here who have experienced this border crossing in the past, and how did they experience it, and how did it affect them, you know? Because I personally know people who have had multiple passports here in Saarland. So, you know, this is what I have in my head, but it's still very vague, you know?
I would suggest one more idea. We have a lot of Ukrainian people who work abroad in Poland, in European Union generally. And I think it's also very common for your region, those who commute or work in other countries. Maybe it can also be interesting topic for research. How do they perceive this crossing borders in everyday life? How do the family live this situation when you are between two countries, or the family stays in one country and some of the family works in another country? And it will be common topic maybe for your region and for our too. And as for the groups or teams, we had a lot of discussions with Astrid and with our service team. And we actually came to conclusion that the most general criteria will be the topic. If you have a common topic, you can do research in different countries, but then you can make one final product in English, one landing page that will consist of 2 stories or 3 stories made by different media, visual, audio or text product, but it will cover only one issue or only one topic. And it will be great if it will be represented from both sides, from your region, one story or 2, and from our region. that's why we have time. Maybe some other ideas will come up, and we will, and even in this stage, we can already create some little teams, groups.
Maybe I can say my idea. So I talked with one of my, so with Jessica, and I had the idea that we kind of create a, like we want to interview someone in the greater region and someone in Ukraine who lives at the border, and show how their behavior with the border. So I wanted to show actually how it is easy to cross the border in the greater region. Like you can work in Luxembourg and live in Germany, or live in France and go to work in Luxembourg and go shopping in Germany, for example. And I wanted to have the same story in Ukraine, and because I don't know how it is in Ukraine actually, so I wanted to do like a comparison between the two regions. But maybe it's not that easy because I saw that your university is not at the border, or maybe at the border of the Crimea. I don't know.
Crimea, and we have a lot of people who work abroad anyway. We have those who go for 3 months, for example, in Poland, and then come back here. So if you modify a little bit, you choose the more general topic, I'm sure you can find a partner. We have Eva and Laura who have questions. Eva, you were the first.
Yeah. I don't know when to leave time for Lisa, when to react, or if we first should collect ideas. I don't know, Lisa. How should we go about it? Are you still collecting? And
I'm collecting, so I can.
Yeah. I just wanted to add something. Also, ask you maybe if you could help students with clarify, or I wanted to pick up something that you mentioned before. I want to go back 2 days when we had our station learning together with Alina. We had a group on languages, and we started a lot of interactions and talked to students. And we already, I wouldn't dare to say got to know a few of them because that's far too big a word, but we already touched on many different situations, and people have lots of different experiences here in this group, and that's really fascinating. And if I understood some of them correctly, or I don't know, could also be my idea, I don't know, that maybe some of them would also like to work on their own stories, or stories very close to them. And you said that the closer it gets, the more tricky it can become. So I was wondering if you could have some advice for them, or would you recommend that? Would you say if you have I don't know, what kind of story that yourself that you'd like to work on, go for it? Or do you say rather maybe talk to your colleague, they can interview you, or what suggestions do you have for people who want to work or with their own topics or with topics very close to them, or family members or whatnot?
Yeah, I will answer Eva, then Adele, Alina, and then Lucas. So I will go, so to speak, backwards. Well, you know how psychologists say never try to do therapy in your own family. It's kind of similar with ethnography. There's actually a vast, I would say that any anthropologist would say you cannot do ethnography in your own family, with own family members, because the process of unknowing and unlearning will not work in your own family setting. It is very, 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 very hard and a psychological distress. However, there is a lot of autoethnography. So people who use their own experiences and bring it to the table of the ethnographic experience. And therefore, I would say yes, if you use your individual experience and do it as a way of your experience with the border or with bordering processes that can be multifaceted, that do not have to entail only placemaking, right? It can be any kind of social border that you face in your life, then definitely I would say you can do that. And then the question is, how would you take on this quest? So would you rather have another student interview you and then help to contextualize with your experiences? Or would you rather maybe make a podcast in an auto narrating style where you really narrate the story? Or would you rather do a photo collage of the experience that you know, it highly depends on what is your experience that you want to talk about, how you would like to portray that in a way to people that they could understand that border practice or border process or whatever it is then that you would like to narrate on. So autoethnography, yes, it's not for everyone. So you have to be the type for it, I would say also. So you have to be aware of what it could do to you also. In an emotional way, maybe, depending on how harsh the story is. But I think it's also a good exercise. In the own family, I'm not sure about that. That's hard. Astrid, directly to that? Yeah. You're muted.
Yes, sorry. Directly to that, yes, because I think there is a difference. I don't know the difference though, between autoethnography or kind of like, you know, talking about yourself as an anthropologist or doing ethnography, so to speak, and filmmaking, right? Because I think you can make a film about your own history, right? You can do a documentary about your history. I'm not sure what the difference then would be. Because in the way I understood you now, if you do an autoethnography, something, by the way, that Gloria Ansaldúa, for instance, is doing in Borderlands, that has also been described as an autoethnography. I see your point, you know, that it gets psychologically straining and emotionally draining and so on, but filmmakers probably have a different approach to that.
Yeah, of course. So it depends on your angle, you know. So of course, when I speak out of a filmmaker's mind, this is super interesting and you should go for it, right? So if I speak as a filmmaker now, because it can be very sensational, it can be very exciting. So there's a lot there to take off of whatever your personal past experience was. But as an ethnographer, looking also at theoretical considerations, because we're still doing science here, even though it is the most humanist of all sciences, but to me, it's still, we're doing science. You have to contextualize your own processes. And I think that takes, also in theoretical ways or in conceptual ways, and I think that takes a lot of self-reflection and working with yourself and the context that you're in, historically, socially, in any alley. So it is, I wouldn't, you know, so there's, for me, is the difference. So when Gloria Ansaldúa does her autoethnography, I don't know what it took her to do it in that way that she did. And she's a great academic, right? So it is, I don't know, I would never do an autoethnography of myself. I don't know, it would not be for me. I think it's also really personal. You know, you have to be suitable for doing that. But of course, from a filmmaker's perspective, I would say, yes, super. Like writing your memoirs or, you know, having a story of your biography seems something very thrilling, but I'm a little bit, how you gonna conceptualize your own life? To me, there's two sides to the coin. Okay, and then about the cross-border relationships with commuters or people who are commuting for work or for shopping or for family reasons. I think that is the topic of cross-border relationships that has been there for the past 10 years. So this is also something that I did in my research, where it's really about cross-border lives and how they work. So not necessarily only talking how the border crossing itself as a physical practice works, but also mentally or through social networks that span across the globe. So it does not necessarily, so your question before was, but is it really at the border? It does not have to be right at the border, you know, to talk about cross-border lives or cross-border realities. So still, the influence of the border will be there, and you will see it in your ethnographic material, and you can use it and work with it. And I think that here people who live in different countries and work in different countries is always, or labor migration is always a good quest to show how cross-border realities are in today's society and today's world. And there you can work with all kinds of video material, you can work with images, but you can also make a podcast. Anything is open there. I think there's multiple options. And for what Lucas talked about, I think this is really interesting that you basically already have key informants, which is always good. So if you already have someone to talk to that you know is a person that really has a cross-border life or a border experience, then that's already a big plus, because you do not have to start and search for someone. So I would definitely say in a short amount of time, go for it and see what you can gather from the material. And here, if it's lying in the past, you could do biographical interviews with people. And that is something, maybe they can show you pictures from back in the days that they would offer you to use. That would be really nice to, contextualize your material, or even inviting them on a podcast and re-asking questions that you maybe ask in the interview informally or however, and then do it again on a platform that kind of contextualizes their experiences with the border. Film would be also very interesting, like, setting up a camera when they're sitting in their homes and then talking about the border. So that would also be interesting. You see, there's a variety of options here. That is, everything here can be of an interesting quest, depending on how you can approach people. What are they open to do with you? Because, you always have to think about ethical considerations, of course. So are they informed about what you're going to do with them? Are they consenting to do it? And when they do, then it's like you hit a lot of jackpot, because then you will have a great product at the end, that they themselves will be also proud of. Because I have the experience that you do not have to be afraid of that you do not get people to talk to you or work with you. A lot of people are out there and they're waiting that somebody wants to hear their story. So, when students a lot of times ask me, but oh God, and if I don't find no one, and it's not going to be like that. You will, a lot of people are there and they want to tell their story. Okay, Laura.
Yes, I just want to give a comment on the team situation, so how we should build a team, because you also talked about like this insider view and outsider view. So I think it would be nice if I think also Alina assumed that we have like these general questions, so that we have on the German side, let's say it like this, also like an insider view, and then also on the Ukrainian side, and then put it together on one page. Because I think when you really want to do field work, and then from here online working like only on a topic, for example, in the Ukraine, I think it would be difficult, because like we really need to be like in the field outside. So I think it would be nice to combine like two insider views with a general question. Yeah, that I wanted to say.
Yeah, definitely. It's good that you added that again, because that, of course, that balance act that we were talking about, you will already have one insider on the one side and one insider on the other side, and then you could help each other. And if I talked about language, I mean, in the Ukraine, I don't know how it is in certain areas. I am not aware of this context, but you might also need a translator for certain things. So I'm not sure if language here is an issue, but I just want to raise that also, that even if you want to research here in Germany, there might some people who of the older generations, maybe they do not speak as good of an English, or they only speak French, or depending on where your research is located, it's always good when you have a sparring partner that can help you with also such issues. And yeah, definitely mutually reflecting when you have a sparring partner, it's easier also to reflect on certain things and to ask each other reflective questions. Why do you think that it is like so, and then you can discuss. So you do not have to go in this discourse process with yourself. You have someone to talk to. So yeah, definitely. I would support that idea because we did that also in our graduate school. So we Germans, we went to Canada, and of course, not all of the Canadians researched in Europe, but that was the initial goal. But I remember that my partner on the Quebec, on the Canadian side, I met with him multiple times in my research time in Montreal, and I asked him, why is it like this? Why is that like this? So I had all my questions I just threw at him, Astrid, at Pierre, and he always helped me to contextualize the local Quebecan context that I didn't understand or I couldn't grasp. So it's always good to have a local key informant, as I said before, who can help you with contextualizing what you do not understand in the first place. Yeah. More questions.
I have a suggestion.
Ideas. Yeah.
Maybe also when we talk here to older people and about their experience with war and closed borders, I think, or with, for example, refugees, you have to be also very careful that you don't raise a traumatism. So you have always to be careful which questions you ask them or which topic you raise. So I think it's also very important that you don't hurt or harm somebody with your research.
Yeah, so that's also part of the ethical considerations that were also raised in the text that you read for today. Remember, they put all these points in the text, and there's also a glossary in these two texts that explain all these words again that are used in ethnographic fieldwork. And one of the big points there was do no harm. This is one of the most main ethical considerations of ethnographic fieldwork, that not only should you not raise any traumatic experiences in people, however, I mean, there's only control to a certain level, because you sometimes, even in the best preparation, you might not know that you hit a nervous point or a sensitive topic, but you will see it then when you reach at that situation. But before going into the field or going into the field, you should always have the precondition in your mind that you do not want to do any harm, and that also the data that you gather doesn't harm people, physically, or even when you work with refugees and they might have not a title yet to stay in Germany. There's a lot of issues that you have to consider. What information, if someone is, for example, irregular migrant, or you meet someone like that in the field, you always have to be careful. Then what information are you sending out or representing outside of this, fieldwork experience? So that is not only a question of direct contact, but also about representation. So you have to be very reflexive, because you're dealing with people's personal data. So data protection here, anonymity, or maybe even pseudonyms for certain people, pseudonymization. So if it's Miss Miller you're talking to, then you might want to name her differently, so, and that her personal data cannot be traced. Especially when you work in smaller contexts, in a rural area in Saarland, everybody might know Miss Müller. You know what so there's the thing. So pseudonymization is also a thing here, and data protection, informed consent, do no harm. These are all ethical considerations that were in the text that you should consider when going into the field, definitely. So other ideas for projects? Who wants to make a film? Who is willing to make a film for whatever it takes? I mean, you do not necessarily have to start from the area or your research partners, but you can also start with the method. That's also a way, like when okay, you definitely want to make a film, and that's your expertise, or you already have, expertise using the camera or shooting. That could also be a reason why you choose method, you know.
When I think about my key informants, I would strongly suggest a film, but you never know if they are willing or.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, are we out of time?
No, we're not out of time.
Okay.
We have just concocted a plan here. We have a new idea. So, you know, for me, by the way, you asked way back, you said, what does it mean to know? You know, if I know something, I'm also in control of things, right? And as a professor, I usually love being in control, right? But to unknow also means not to be in control. And I know that I very often have to let go. So if what do you think? I wanted to ask you, Lisa, and then the others, and Alina, what do you think if we now, this is why I just called Tobias here behind the scenes, because he's getting ready. If we now kind of split up this group into smaller groups and we do a little speed dating here, and you have only very short time, but that way you could collect ideas and see, you know, if you can possibly, you know, come up with teams. I think we should start eventually, you know, make a list of possible topics, questions, and then create teams. We're meeting again next week, and I think by then we should have the teams together, because then we will also get to know Clayton, whom you briefly introduced today, and hopefully he can be there with us next week. And I don't know, maybe you have time to come back. I don't know. The others will be there, but then you already know kind of, you know, which teams you're in and which questions. So I was thinking maybe now we could, you know, do this. I don't know, Alina, what do you think? And if it's technically possible, Tobias,
maybe we can just at first break students in group of 5 to make a small brainstorming, just to collect key ideas. And then if somebody wants to change team or group, we can do it next week. But today, the most important thing is to define key topics, I think, that can be researched on both sides.
Lisa, do you think that's a good idea? Does that interfere with your plan? Because it's so good to have you here, because you can then also guide us in the direction, so to speak. Of.
I mean, yeah, you definitely, you cannot go inductively to the field. So you definitely have to have a plan here. So this is not, you know, how ethnographers do it normally. Let's just go and see. No, you have to have a plan. That's what I said in the beginning. So you should think about where, why, how, and, you know, for how long and with whom. I think these are the main questions here. And also, you know, there is also another possibility. I mean, for me personally, I don't think everyone has to work with people. So there can be ethnography of graffitis. You know, you yourself could look at media as well as ethnographic artifacts and interpret them at the border, or, you know, they're there because of the border. So these would also be options to make a photo collage of that and interpret that, so that, you know, there's, just to say, not everyone has to do interviews now. As I said, ethnography is about also participant observation. So there's other options of approaching the border here than just getting people's experiences alone. So that's just something I wanted to say.
Okay, so then we break you up into rooms. Tobias is working on it. I can already see that.
Yeah, sure, we're good to go.
You good to, excellent. And then when we come back, we have more food for thought for you, Lisa, right?
Okay.
Okay, so we have 3 rooms, 3 groups of 5 people, 1 group of 4 people. I'll give you 5 minutes for a little speed take around to get acquainted with each other. And we as lecture students will then just jump around and visit you occasionally in your groups. And you'll be notified 30 seconds before the room closes that the room is about to close. Okay? But yeah, good fun. See you later.
Come back with brilliant ideas.
So where do I need to go now?
You stay with us.
Okay.
And we will keep recording this, so we have to be aware of that.
You can basically jump around rooms if you want to, Lisa.
Exactly.
So
I
you,
don't know. I think I would. I'm not doing this because I think that would interfere. They would be afraid when I'm there what they say. So I would not do that right now. I would stay here because I don't want to influence them. You know, like with my presence.
sure.
Also something.
Should I stop? Maybe I stop the recording now. Okay, so recording stopped in a moment. Thank you.